Hello, I'm Kads, and welcome to today's video. So today we're going to be covering my fusion plan for getting Haggibah the Nestmaid, the latest traditional fusion in the game. And boy, is this lady controversial. She's, of course, the last, I guess, of the 6 Web of Corruption themed champions. And the showcases, the thoughts, the reviews of the champion have not been good thus far. And unfortunately, I am not here to dispel that narrative. When we saw her kit on paper, it seemed interesting, and maybe she was going to be like, the legendary commoner, so to speak. And yeah, needless to say, she's falling a little bit short. Let's dive into her kit to understand why I feel that way, and probably most of the community feels that way as well. So first off, she's a Force Affinity legendary HP-based champion, and she does have decently high base stats, nearly 24,000 on the HP for an HP-based champion, which is good, and then defense of 1200, speed of 103, and then a little bonus on accuracy. Let's start with the A3 because that's kind of her bread and butter ability. It's a AoE buff steal and a 100% chance when booked on a 3-turn cooldown and placing 2 bombs on all enemies that detonate after 2 turns. However, if she is successful in stealing their buffs, the bombs will detonate after 1 turn instead, which has some problems with it that we'll come back to a little bit later. Next up, the A2, which is kind of the companion ability. It instantly detonates all bomb debuffs and activates 1 tick of HP burn as well. And also can place an AoE leech on a 100% chance on a 3-turn cooldown when booked. And I guess I should mention that the bombs placed by her scale with her HP, so it's not an attack-based bomb like most of the other bombers in the game. She is similar to Commonus in that regard, where the bombs scale off her max HP. Lastly, we have the A1 here that has a 100% chance when booked of placing an HP burn and also on a single target, and then it also places a perfect veil on this champion for 1 turn. So it's kind of a nice little bonus damage, so to speak, but not the most useful thing in a vacuum. On the passive, which is where we kind of thought she was going to be a little bit more interesting, but in practice it's not as good as it seems. But I'm once again getting ahead of myself. She is immune to HP burn and bomb debuffs, and so she cannot receive any damage from burns at all. She's not like Ashnar, where you get to heal from it, or kind of inverts it for the rest of your team. It's just that her by herself will not take any damage from burn. She can't have burn placed on her. Whenever an enemy tries to CC her outside of sheep, or when they try to lock her out, it will place a bomb debuff that detonates after 1 turn on that person who is the caster of the CC and or the lockout, and these debuffs will ignore the bombs, that is, will ignore block debuffs, which is kind of cool, but has some problems as well. So overall, I think just, looking at her in a vacuum, she's a decently cool, AoE buff strip, place some bombs like it could detonate after 1 turn, or if you pair her up with someone else, she can just detonate all the bombs that someone else placed. She can also be kind of like a Theodore, where she can just go into a burn activation team despite not having burns, AoE burn herself. She does have that 1 single target here, but it's not, it's going to take forever for her to place it on everyone if you want to depend on that. So she can do some work. She can place bombs on people who try to CC her, but the problem is that in the current meta, at least when it comes to bombs are predominantly useful in PvP situations, and this is a meta that is like probably 4 years old that she'd be good in, not the current state. You have Stone Skin, the gear set, which has a chance to not be removed, plus a lot of people, if they're running Stone Skin, they're also running a Lightning Cage on it, which makes it even harder to steal buffs from enemies, meaning that you're most likely going to place the bomb for 2 turns. Even though that's great for Stone Skin, that probably means that the enemies are going to have a chance to take a turn and deal with the bombs, either cleanse or kill you before the bombs go off. And then of course, with the total guard meta as well, because this is not really an attack, it's not going to do a damn thing against people with Imperial stacks because you're not attacking them. Maybe if you're running deflection, it could do a little bit, but you're sacrificing the bombs to break stacks, which is not really that worth it. So again, she just doesn't really do what you'd want to do in the current meta relative to PvP. Now that being said, the one place where you can use bombs in PvE would be against Bommel, and being that she is immune to bomb debuffs, she is excellent, and burn for that matter. She's excellent against Bommel. She could probably solo him, to be honest, in some regen sets, so that could be an opportunity to upgrade from a what's her name, a Lady Annabelle to a Haggibah, and then she could basically be the same role, probably do it a lot faster, because obviously Bommel takes a lot of extra damage for bombs. She's going to be tanky because you're going to scale her with high HP and a decent amount of accuracy so that her bombs do damage, or so that she can land her bombs and thus they can do damage. So that could be an option, but that's a real niche use case for her in particular, which is probably not what you want to see in a champion. Like I mentioned with the A2, technically, if you manage to set the table for some other bomb champion, or I guess if you're lucky enough to have a Chrono Cube on her, you could bomb them and then can blow up all the bombs, and that could be some strategy, but you'd have to have someone who sets her up, i.e. gets rid of everyone's buffs, including Stone's Can't and Mercurial. That way you can actually land it, because this is a place, it's not a attack, and then she can come around and activate this. But that definitely seems like a very, very tall order. And even with the bombs from the passive, this is just, again, not as useful. I don't, honestly, the way it seems, I don't even think it would be that broken. But if this was placed a bomb for 0 turns, meaning that like it instantly detonated the bomb on the person who placed it, that would probably be more, maybe not more balanced, but that would be better. But in the way this works, you know, let's say if Fabian comes in, locks you out, you place a bomb on him, cool, it detonates after 1 turn. But again, you know, most people are running Lightning Cage or Ward of the Fallen or something else, so he doesn't get an extra turn. So he doesn't instantly die because he took his turn, it ended, and then someone comes around after that and just cleanses off the bomb because it's there for 1 turn. And so once again, it's just not going to be that effective. Maybe if these bombs were they ignored Block Devos and they were protected, meaning they couldn't be cleansed, maybe we'd be talking a little, again, you know, something a little more powerful. But it's just kind of not enough. And in most cases, all that your enemy's going to do is they're just going to tank the bombs that you put out with the passive, and then cleanse them all off on their next turn. Or at least the person who didn't, you know, someone who has a cleanser who's not obviously applying CC would just come around and cleanse it, and then this is just not going to do anything, fortunately. And overall, I think the biggest problem that I saw with her was that even though she is an HP based bomber, like Commodus puts people in the dirt when he pops his bombs on you, and she just did not seem to bring a similar level in terms of the multipliers on the bombs. Obviously, we don't exactly know what they are. Maybe some people do because they've data mined it now that she's live in the game, but at least at the time of this recording, I'm not aware of the exact multipliers and how they compare to Commodus, but it does feel substantially weaker, and or maybe Commodus just scales a lot better as a mythical with HP based stats. So all in all, yeah, she's an extremely underwhelming champion, unfortunately, in terms of getting her. But honestly, a lot of people might see that as perfect or a good fortune, because of course the fusion exchange system is back, because this is in play because this is a traditional style fusion. It is not a fragment summon, meaning that if you are missing some of the S tier champions and you've built up you've gotten every fusion token that they've offered so far, which is 3, this means it's your first opportunity to swap out her for someone of your choice from the tier 1 system, which is probably a really solid option that a lot of people will be taking. But of course, let me know what your plan is in the comment section down below. An important thing to note, though, is that if you do intend to swap her out for someone, you do then effectively still have to do the fusion, so you're not really out of the woods. You can just change the champion you get at the end. So if you're interested in going for her, or just going for the fusion in general to use a fusion token or to get a fusion token, then let's hop over into the spreadsheet and talk or dive into the calendar for the event. This spreadsheet will be linked in the description box down below if you'd like to follow along for yourself. So for the most part, we have a fairly standard calendar. We have a 4 dungeon split. We have no event dungeon, despite it being open. It's not associated with the fusion, which I do find a little bit surprising, but nonetheless, we'll take it. 2 classic arena tournaments, 1 champion training tournament, champion chase tournament. We have 2 gear hunters, which is nice because it could have been 3, but it is 2 in this case. We have 3 gear enhancements. We have 1 champion training event, and then surprise, surprise, we have 2 summon rushes. So the main summon rush starting this weekend, and then a bonus summon rush in the middle of next week during Clan Siege. For anyone unfamiliar with this spreadsheet, over here on the right hand side, we have a summary of all of the milestones for each of the events and tournaments. Anything marked with an asterisk is a predicted value. Anything that is just the number without the asterisk is what the actual values are in the game, and I make sure to go and update those as events go live. But there is a decent amount of historical precedent that will predict what these values may be. So the main things I want to point you guys towards is the fact that once again there are 2 summon rushes, and each of them has 1 rare. Normally, or at least historically, the bonus summon rush might have the epic alongside a rare, or just an epic, but in this case each of the summon rushes has 1 of the rares. If your goal is to get all 16 of the rares, you would need to do both of the summon rushes to whatever their milestones are for those rares. And the champion chase tournament instead is where the epic is alongside a rare, so it's kind of different. They've done this in the past, in fairness, but this is not the typical arrangement for where the epic is in a fusion. But nonetheless, it's important to note that if you want to skip out on the summon rushes and just go all in on the champion chase, which could be a good idea depending upon your strategy, then you can just focus your efforts there, get an epic, and then skip 4 of the rares, and which could include the summon rushes and some other events. So it kind of depends what your strategy is. Now, one thing I do want to point out here is that I'm expecting this to be an extremely expensive fusion when it comes to shards, because as you can see here, that the spreadsheet does go all the way back to Pythion, so multiple years of previous fusions. But the main thing is Volan had 2x Ancients. This was back in the middle of June. And then if we hop over to the Titan event tab, we just had 2x Voids last weekend for the Princely Titan event, meaning that most likely this champion chase is going to be 2x Sacreds, which is bad because that's the most expensive form of a 2x. The shard that people have the least of is typically Sacreds, so that's going to be fairly costly. And again, that is where the epic is, meaning that if your goal is to get a rare plus the epic and skip some events, you're going to have to rip through a lot of Sacreds or have some other form of air quotes free points to redeem in the champion chase. And then of course, alongside that, you do also have the summon rushes, which could also then be relatively speaking expensive. One other thing I do like to highlight here is the resources that I spend on some of these events and tournaments. And so you can see here we have a prediction for how much silver, but if you go back in time, you can see exactly how much silver I spent on each gear enhancement or the types of shards I pulled to get the fusion fragments or the fusion champions and or events that I didn't do entirely. And so here you kind of see that I am currently not exactly sure what my plan is just yet. We have some predicted milestones, but they could be higher, they could be lower. Again, these are just predictions. Who knows exactly where they're going to set things. Same thing for the champion chase. So like I hinted at earlier, it could be a better approach to kind of chase the champion chase. That way you only have to pull once and it's 2x Sacreds. You go through some Sacreds, you get some, fragment summons, remnant summons, and all these other things to get air quotes free points. And that way you can get to whatever the milestone is here. And then you'd be able to skip some of the events, or you could do it in reverse. You can just focus on getting each of the rares. So you just do a little bit of the summon rush, a little bit of this summon rush, a little bit of the champion chase, and don't worry about the epic. It kind of depends. But my point is, even I'm not exactly sure what my overall strategy will be just yet. I think it will depend on where the milestone is in the first summon rush, and then what the champions are on the boosted race for the progressive chance event. If there's someone that I would like to shoot my shot for, even though there's a relatively low chance that I get a legendary coming off of the Sacred Pogo, you never know. But that might sway me to pull, be a little bit more conservative, pull a little bit for the first summon rush, and then kind of play it by ear for the rest of it. So my options are a little bit open from that regard. Jumping back to the calendar, one thing I always like to highlight are what I call pinch points, which is the overlap of champion training and dungeon events. And so this case, we have champion training overlapping with half of Spider and a little bit of Dragon. Then we also have champion training overlapping with the entirety of Fire Knight down the line, and then a little bit of Ice Golem. The energy plan row is just a summary of how I plan to spend my energy over each of the days of the fusion. That's not a prescription for how you should necessarily spend your energy, but just kind of tracking once again how I plan to do the fusion and just how I approach fusions in general. And then last but not least, this is a traditional style fusion, meaning that you do have to ascend all the epics and ascend all the rares. So we can hop over to the fusion potion calculator tab, and we plug in that we have 4 force epics and 16 void rares, and then these are the total amounts of potions you would need to ascend all of the fusions associated with the fusion. Popping back in the game, let's talk about some of the current events going on in the game, starting off with my supply count at the moment. So I like to take a snapshot of my supplies at the beginning of fusion because I like to summarize it at the end in a couple of weeks on a post on my community tab page, talking about the deltas in my resources in terms of shards, silver, and gems to highlight what it costs me as an endgame free-to-play player to actually do fusions, because I do every single fusion regardless of whether or not the champion is going to be useful, just because you never know in the future they might get buffed or they might end up being useful in some future content that does not yet exist. So in this case, we're taking a snapshot of gems at, let's call it 5950, and then silver was 504 million this morning. Of course, the fusion started earlier. I've done a little bit of Spider because that is the first tournament that's live in the game. Let's take a quick look through some of the already live and upcoming events. So like I mentioned, Spider tournament is live, standard milestone there at the 2250, and I'm making some progress, a decent amount. By the end of today, I'll probably be at we're already at 600. Maybe we'll be at like 900 or so. So good ways into the Spider tournament. Then the champion training starts tomorrow as well. I'll be going for that probably. I think that's a 4-star basalt there. So I typically max out the entirety of champion training tournaments and events depending upon the rewards above and beyond what's required for the fusion. So keep that in mind when it comes to the totals at the end when we summarize it. And then we also have the coalition event. We're not going to talk about that. That's not really associated with the fusion. Titan event is over. We do have the first Gear Hunters events. Thankfully, there are only 2. And it is a fairly standard milestone up there at 3,700, which is definitely on the higher side, but also relatively achievable given the overlap of a dungeon tournament and champion training, depending upon how hard you go in the campaign and the dungeon. So typically for me, at least, when I spend my energy on both of those overlapping over the course of 3 days, I can typically get out to the 3,700 relatively easily. And then we have a gear enhancement event starting tomorrow as well. So I'll be holding off on leveling up my gear until then. And my plan is to focus on artifacts because, as you can see here, I am full once again. So we're going to do a little bit of a gear cleanse for myself and try to create some space so I don't have a backlog of extra stuff. This is my stuff from Hydra that I've kept so far. But in fairness, I'm also relatively full on accessories as well. 1985 out of 2000. So we're we're approaching the caps on from two sides, unfortunately. So we're gonna have to clear all of that out. We're trying to make some space at least to do that. But that's the perfect time to do it with the gear enhancement starting tomorrow. So yeah, those are my thoughts on the champion. I do not think she's really good or anything. And you know, my default setting, like I said, is to go for every fusion regardless of whether or not they're good. So I'm gonna go for her. I don't plan to exchange her for any champion just because, like I've said at the very beginning when this system was announced, I don't really care that much about anyone from the past. I would love to have Helikath. I would like to have Kriela Witcharm. Those are kind of the only two. Maybe Harpstack would be kind of cool as well after the buff. But I'm willing to just wait and see if I just pull them naturally versus sacrificing a champion who would be, you know, relatively hard to get again, aside from using the system once again. Essentially, just in case she does become useful or get buffed in the future, I don't want to have to be stuck in a situation where I'll always have to be trading future fusions for past fusions in order to make up for fusions that I exchanged in the past. I'd rather just bank the new champion, have them on my account, and then just use them as needed, if at all, and just hope for RNG to deliver me the rest of the champions I look for from previous fusion events. Let me know in the comment section down below what your plan is relative to this fusion. Are you going for her? Are you going for whoever you're going to exchange her for? Or are you in need of an extra fusion token? Because honestly, if you were going to skip a fusion, even if in lieu of passing on a fusion token, just because I anticipate this to be a very costly fusion in terms of overall sacreds, then this would probably be the one to pass on, which is usually not what I say when it comes to fusions. But like I said, I do think her kit is just coming into the meta at a horrendously bad time for what she does. And unless you're really, really struggling with Bommel and you want to use her for that, I don't think she's going to make a splash on most people's account in the current arena meta or even the current PvE meta. But again, those are just my thoughts. So let me know if you agree or disagree in the comment section down below. As always, if you did find this video helpful, then be sure to hit that like button down below. It really does help out the channel, and feel free to hit the subscribe button down below as well, if and only if you're enjoying the content overall on this channel for more content just like this one in the future. Thanks for watching and have a good one.